and welcome to Manufacturing Sustainability 20-Minute Talks. I'm Gemma, your host for this series where I'll be talking with the people leading the conversation in manufacturing sustainability. Today's guest is Bruce Bradshaw, Chief Marketing Officer at 6K. Bruce leads 6K's marketing and sustainability efforts globally. His experience in strategy, product marketing, communication and messaging helped to position 6K as leading producers of sustainable materials in the additive manufacturing and battery markets using their proprietary UniMelt technology. 6K describes UniMelt plasma as providing a path for true sustainability, reducing carbon emissions, lowering energy use and utilising recycled content to create a circular economy, all while reducing conversion costs and providing a secure domestic US supply chain. Bruce brings over 20 years experience and expertise in technology and marketing, and 15 of those years has been spent in additive manufacturing for organisations like Evolve, Arcam, a GE additive company, and Stratasys. In this episode, I wanted to understand more about the three divisions of 6K: additive, energy, and next. I think that 6K represents the opportunity and innovation that sustainability offers to manufacturing. It's exciting to see companies emerging with sustainability at their core. So let's get into this episode. If you're new to our series, I always start by asking our guests to tell us a bit about their career journey and how they reached their current role. Let's hear from Bruce.
So, been in marketing for 30 years. The first half of my career was in software and in digital cameras and all that fun stuff. But the most relevant part is probably the last 18 to 20 years where I spent in additive manufacturing to start. I joined a company called Objet, which I'm not sure if folks watching know of Objet, but that was the Israeli company that developed the technology called PolyJet for 3D printing. And so I led the marketing efforts in the US for Objet. And in 2012, we merged with Stratasys. So I became the vice president of marketing in North America for Stratasys. I think folks probably are aware of Stratasys. And then I actually joined in 2014 a company called Arcam, which made metal 3D printers was its primary product, but they had also purchased a company called AP&C, which is a powder manufacturer relevant to my current role, and I'll explain that in a moment. They were metal powder producers based in Canada. They're still around, and a great company. And then we set that company up to be purchased by GE, and it was one of the two companies that formed GE Additive, the other one being Concept Laser. So I spent about a year at GE, which was a fun time trying to help grow and build that organization and blend two cultures together. And I had a little bit of experience with that on the Objet Stratasys merger as well. So that was fun. And then myself and Scott Crump, who's the founder of Stratasys, and two other gentlemen, Steve Chilson being the inventor of this technology, spun out a technology out of Stratasys called Evolve Additive. Awesome technology. It's still in the market today. It's a high volume manufacturing for plastics. Brand new technology, new to the market, has some really good advantages, but awesome technology. So I spent about 2 years there. And then I actually had the fortune to meet Aaron Bent, who's the CEO of 6K, telling me about what 6K was all about. And for those that don't know, 6K is a manufacturer of critical materials. The first division that was set up was for metal powder, similar to what I did at AP&C. So I jumped at the chance because the technology is so cool. I'm sure we'll get into it more when we chat about the company. It also allowed me to utilize my experience in additive manufacturing, but also gain new market experience in electrification and batteries and energy storage, and now even newer technologies and newer markets that we're going after that we'll talk about with 6K next.
One of the things I'm interested in understanding right from the beginning is, I guess, your perspective on manufacturing. Where do you see the need for change in the industry?
So that's a great question. And it's funny because, coming early on from the Objet days where 3D printing was all about prototyping and started to catch on in the manufacturing world. And as I mentioned, Evolve was a manufacturing technology. Started to cut my teeth there. And it was interesting to see how manufacturing technologies are starting to adopt, emerging technologies like 3D printing. It's true now also on the metal side of stuff for us, where you're seeing a lot of stuff in aerospace and space and medical implants. But now you're starting to see new markets that have traditionally embraced prototyping and 3D printing, like automotive. Automotive is really starting to look at high volume applications, not just for decorative pieces on cars, but actual engine components and drivetrain components. And it's all brought about by the number of materials that are available. So the world of materials has evolved immensely. And so things like refractory materials are huge. And so those companies are starting to see opportunities that they didn't see in the past that allow them to start to take metal additive in a serious way and start to apply that to manufacturing. So that's one. But the thing that is most interesting to me that I didn't realize actually when I started at the company at 6K is sustainability is, in 2019, 5 years ago when I started here, was an interesting topic. It caught the attention of folks, but it was like, oh, that's interesting. But 5 years later, it is now a completely different picture. So being able to provide benefit on the sustainability side for manufacturing, and for us in particular, for critical materials, has really caught on. And it's not just a check mark for companies. It is a serious game that they're looking at. They're really looking to make some huge strides in their environmental footprint and leveraging their manufacturing technologies and what they're doing and how they're getting there. They're really starting to pay attention and they're starting to measure. And for us at 6K, that's kind of the root of who we are. And we can actually provide some benefit to the customers and their customers on the environmental footprint that they deliver and why it's important and how it's being adopted in the manufacturing process.
Let's get a bit further into 6K Inc. then. I know that it's made up of 3 divisions. So you have 6K Energy, 6K Additive, and 6K Next. I'd like you to tell us a bit about each area of the business, but also how you're driving sustainability across the company.
Sure. So let me start out. I just referenced sustainability in the previous question. That is the core of what we do here at 6K. So just a brief explanation of the parent company, 6K. It is the developer of a technology called UniMelt. It stands for uniform melting. It's a plasma, microwave plasma that runs at 6,000 degrees that gives us tremendous flexibility in doing all kinds of materials for vast array of markets. But the first 3 that we've attacked are additive manufacturing, which you've mentioned, battery and electrification for EVs and energy storage, and then 6K Next, which is kind of looking at what's the next technology. But the thread for all of it has to do with sustainable materials and sustainable material for critical applications. So on the additive side, let me just talk about that. We have a manufacturing plant just outside of Pittsburgh that produces metal powder, as I said. What sets us apart from others in the industry is the sustainability part. Certainly we're doing our part on the quality side. We can go toe-to-toe with any company from a quality standpoint. So, but let's just set that aside for a second and talk about the sustainability part. So our technology, we start with scrap material, waste and revert for metal manufacturing. So if you look at subtractive technology that makes CNC parts, and they produce a lot of scrap, CNC shavings, things along those lines. We have the ability to take those materials that are already certified chemistry for aerospace or medical, whatever the subtractive technology is being used to make that part. We can take that and put that through the 6,000 degree microwave plasma and create high quality material again, certified chemistry, something they're already aware of. Traceability is a huge part of it. And out the other end comes quality powder. But during the process, we use 91% less energy than the competitive technology, which is typically atomization for making metal powders. And we have 92% less carbon emissions. So the combination of starting with scrap material, we have a unique process also in the middle where we mill the material to the size we want. So in laser powder bed fusion, it's typically 15 to 45 or 20 to 63 or some variant of that. Atomization technology typically has about a 20 to 30% yield. In some cases, they're getting to 40% of powder that's in that powder size distribution. The rest of it, in the case of titanium, if it's oversized or undersized, typically is waste that either has to go to landfill or be incinerated. So not a very sustainable process. So if you combine starting with scrap material, having 100% yield of the powder size distribution we have, and the sustainability metrics I talked about with energy use and CO2, it is a very sustainable manufacturing process. So that's 6K additive.
Yeah.
Now, if you talk about 6K energy, it's using the same technology with probably about 5 to 10% difference in some of the components of the UniMelt itself. But now we're making cathode active material for the EV market and energy storage market.
Yeah.
And if you think of the way that's typically done today, 85% of the world's battery material comes from China today. There's zero production scale in the United States. I think there's like 1% in the UK. And then most of it typically comes from Asia Pacific. So there's some small pockets around the globe, but in the US, nothing, and essentially in Europe, nothing. So if you think of the way that's produced, picture your large chemical factory with smokestacks and wastewater and all those nasty things that you don't want to have associated with manufacturing. That's how cathode material is being done today. Yeah. Our technology, much like the additive story, we basically produce the cathode active material in 2 seconds to 3 hours, depending on the material that you're doing for the entire process. In that same type of metrics that we talked about on the energy side, there's zero hazardous waste produced for us. We use 90% less water. We're about 65 to 70% less energy and better carbon footprint than the technology. It's typically called co-precipitation for NMC in particular. So the same story that we hear about and think about on the additive side, we can apply to the energy side. The other thing, just outside the sustainability part, for 6K energy, we can have the best sustainable production process in the world. However, if we're not competitive on the price, automotive OEMs, we know the what they're looking for and what they're, what's going to turn their heads. We are 50% less cost producing that material through our technology in the United States than buying it from China. And then add to that all the tariffs and all the things that are happening around the globe about adding that stuff. Obviously, having IRA compliant materials in the United States and similar to what's going to be happening in Europe, those are huge advantages for what we do. So the sustainability message, along with the quality and pricing, is huge on the additive side. And then last, let me transition to 6K Next. So it's actually, 6K Next is one of our best kept secrets. If you go to our website right now, you'll see nothing about 6K Next, but that's soon to be on our website. Yeah, it's actually a division that we've recently formed in a formal way. And it's looking at what's the next market, what's the next critical material that we can actually start to look at with the UniMelt. We've done experiments with phosphorus for lighting. We've done stuff for semiconductors, lots of different marketplaces that we've looked at. But again, the underlying thread is sustainability. So with 6K Next, that's what they're looking at. So two of the markets that have become interesting, and we'll have to see which way we go, is one is producing carbon nanotubes. So single wall carbon nanotubes with our technology that 6K Next is looking at. In one of the areas that carbon nanotubes is being used is in cement production. So I'm not sure if folks know, but I think it's something like 2 to 3% of the world's CO2 is produced from cement production. We can lower that immensely by adding carbon nanotubes. So again, adding the sustainability part of it. The other area that we're looking at is PFAS destruction and remediation. And again, I'll just spend a second. For those that don't know, PFAS is referred to as the forever chemical. It's what's in Teflon. It's what's in the waterproofing in your clothes. It's in everybody's drinking water to a certain percent. There's levels that become dangerous, but it's not a good chemical. It's probably in everybody's body. It's a carcinogen. And there's EPA regulations that have just been updated. So they're going to try and eliminate this or at least manage PFAS from the point of view of environmental footprint. And so our technology allows us to eliminate the PFAS. So from that, we'll get, right now our experiments are somewhere around 99.8 to 99.9% reduction. Most of the technology that's being done today is under 98%. It's typically done with incineration, and incineration, you don't actually get rid of the PFAS. The chemicals go into the air, and so it just recirculates back into the water. With our technology, one area is looking at something referred to as GAC, which is granulated active carbon. That's the filter that captures all the PFAS. But once it's actually in the filter, what do you do with that? Because it hasn't gone away yet. So our technology allows us to put what's referred to as the GAC through the UniMelt, actually reactivate that GAC so it can be put back into a filter. And out the other end comes fluorine that can be used in other parts of the manufacturing process, and the PFAS is destroyed. So we're creating material that can go back into the manufacturing process as well as destroying PFAS. So it's pretty unique technology. We're getting lots of attention with the stealth conversations that we are having about 6K Next. So it's having an impact already, and we're not even public with it. So, maybe depending on when this comes out, you might be the first one to be debuting 6K Next publicly.
It's fascinating, Bruce, and I think that the landscape's changing, and with that, the game's changing completely, isn't it? And we're seeing innovation really rise around sustainability now. So how's 6K helping their customers face their own sustainability challenges then?
So let's take 6K Additive and the benefits that we have. Clearly, there's just by using our material, they're having an impact, right?
Yeah.
But there's a dollar figure associated with how we're producing that material. So if they're buying material from atomization today, and then tomorrow they decide they're going to buy from us, they can actually apply a dollar figure of how much carbon footprint they're offsetting. So if a lot of companies are buying carbon offsets, which I'm not necessarily a fan of, but a lot of companies are doing it, where they're actually not green themselves, but they buy carbon offsets.
Yeah.
A company can actually lower their carbon offset purchases simply by using our material. And if you look at the price of carbon offsets or in Europe or carbon offsets in the United States, they're drastically different. But in Europe in particular, there's some meaningful dollars that a company can save simply by using a sustainable powder like ours compared to using an atomized powder. So it is helping them be more sustainable in a very tangible way as opposed to buying carbon offsets, and lowering their cost for carbon offsets simply by buying powder made with a sustainable production. The same thing applies for the battery side. So in the case of 6K Energy, in the United States in particular, the government allows for a $7,500 discount if you're using IRA compliant materials and doing production of those materials in the United States. So an EV company has the ability to take that and either use it themselves or lower the cost to an EV purchaser of $7,500 simply by using the material that's IRA compliant, which is huge. So that's a very tangible thing, not only for the EV companies, but also for the consumer who's actually buying it. So it's a pass-through that absolutely. And then there's other incentives like a 10% tax credit and things like that, that if you're buying materials from IRA compliant sources, companies have those benefits. So that's a real benefit. And then if you start to look at 6K Next, again, I referenced the changes in the EPA regulations. Semiconductor companies are going to start to be fined dramatically by putting PFAS or not removing the PFAS from the hazardous waste. So that's yet to be determined and how that's going to happen, but that's going to have a huge financial impact on semiconductor companies. Even firefighting foam is one that's a huge creator of PFAS. So all of those things are starting to be regulated. And so there's going to be some heavy dollars and fines if people aren't dealing with PFAS correctly. So we can have a huge impact on that area as well.
Yeah. And I think actually, you said earlier on in the conversation that manufacturers are driven by cost. Well, we're going to see those cost implications around sustainability, aren't we? They go hand in hand.
100%. It's interesting. I'll just add this. So we're involved in a lot of RFQs now for the battery cell manufacturers and auto manufacturers, and part of it is you need to there's a forum called Supplier Assurance that the European manufacturers, BMW, Ford, Volkswagen, Volvo, all these guys all subscribe and work with Supplier Assurance. And it's basically a measuring stick or a number that they place on you as a company as to what your sustainability benefits are. And if you're not meeting the things that they require from a sustainability, and it's not just environmental, it is social, it's all of those things. If you're not meeting the mark, you cannot be a supplier to those companies if you're not at least meeting the minimum standards. And fortunately for us, we go beyond it, but it is something that's hard and measured these days that, again, 5 years ago when I started this company, I'm not sure it was, but it definitely is today.
I'd like to understand a bit more about what's happening inside the organisation and what 6K is doing from an environmental, social and governance perspective and what that means.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's interesting you referenced customers. So as a company, you think you're doing all the right things and you hope you're doing all the right things, but then you have customers, like I referenced the Supplier Assurance group that asks the hard questions. And so when you start to go down that list of these questions and you realize, we're actually missing some things inside the organization that we need to pull together. I've referenced our environmental management system. We actually were doing all those things, but we didn't have a spotlight and didn't have a central environmental management system that helped us check and certify and do the things that we need to do, or to make sure we're doing the things that we needed to do. So the Supplier Assurance questionnaire that we had to fill out shined a spotlight on the areas that we needed to improve on. So as an organization, being small and agile, we were able to rally and change those things around so that we met the requirements that we needed for that. But it's interesting how you think you're doing the right things as a company, but when a customer asks those hard questions and forces you to look internally at yourselves, it helps so much. And we're grateful of that. And I'm sure we feel like we're doing all the right things, but there's always room for improvement, and we'll continue to do that as an organization.
These things matter, don't they? It's important
100%.
To recruit, to grow, to supply, that being compliant and taking this, taking sustainability and social responsibilities seriously really does have impact.
Yeah, and it's funny, the environmental management system, interesting enough, when we looked at putting it in place, again, for those that aren't aware, it requires from the highest levels of the organization to be engaged in part of that and helping drive the company with not only coming up with those policies, but adherence to those policies. So our management team is actively involved in it, and it's something that permeates throughout the organization.
Bruce, thanks so much for taking the time out today to come and have this conversation with us. It's been great to chat. This has been 20 Minute Talks.
Thanks, Gemma. Appreciate it.